Hello, everybody. At first, I'd like to say that I absolutely loved the Michael biopic. I didn't go to see it at first because it sort of seemed like the same old story I'd been listening to for years. But the real magic came in the casting. The characters could not have been done any better. Jafar Jackson was fantastic. He invoked the spirit of Michael. And if you don't look closely, sometimes you can't tell if it's the nephew or Michael on video when you're watching YouTube. With that said, unfortunately, the whole negative side of Michael's life has been in the news again. Everyone's discussing it, all the problems he had, sight problems, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sick and tired of it. He was a good person. He was a troubled person. The music industry destroyed him, just like they destroyed Elvis and Whitney Houston and a lot of other entertainers. When I was 20 and living in Hollywood, I was in our apartment. I was staying at my new boyfriend's house, and he said, "Oh my God, I forgot to pay the utility bill." We didn't have the internet in those days. So he said, "Oh my God, I'm going to go pay it. I have a friend coming by, and so, I'll be right back." And I thought, well, what do I need to talk to your friend for? I can just hop in the shower, wash my hair, and when he knocks on the door and no one answers, then he'll go away. So I'm in the shower washing all my hair, and I open my eyes and I look up at the largest black man I have ever seen. We're talking 7 feet, 7.5 feet tall. He was on the other side of the frosted window glass. And I went, and he goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I can't believe it. I thought Sterling was in here. Oh my God, oh my God." He's trying to get out and he's tripping over his big feet. He almost broke his neck. He just kept saying, "I'm so sorry. I thought Sterling was in here." And I opened the door and said, "He's not here." And he goes, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." And he ran away. So that is how I met music arranger Gene Page. And Gene Page is one of the most influential music arrangers of his time, particularly from the 1960s to the 80s. And I had listened to all his music growing up. I just didn't really know who he was. So the next day, Sterling took me to meet him, and his office was in an old, rundown, weathered bungalow on Highland Street. And there were three post war bungalows there, and his was in the middle. Another arranger used the one to the right, and the one to the left was all boarded up. So this did not ring success to me, if you know what I mean. I thought he was a musician and he probably did well, but I didn't realize he was the guy in the music industry who musicians say to this day, no one has done for music what Gene did. I did not know if you put together a bunch of session musicians, Gene would be considered the top arranger, and Glenn Campbell would be considered the top guitarist. I knew nothing like that. So Sterling and I go into his office, and it's in a side room, like a dining room, and it had a upright piano, his desk, and then a red couch in front of the picture window. As it turns out, a lot of famous asses had sitting on that couch, including Marvin Gaye and Lionel Richie and possibly Barry White. But I didn't know what was going on. So the two men were talking, and as time went on, I had to pee. I had to pee, and I'm holding it and waiting and hopping on one foot and hopping on the other. And I just can't wait anymore. And I said, "Can I use your bathroom?" And he says, "Oh, sure. Let me show you where it is. Wait a minute. I think we need toilet paper. Let me look." And he opens up his cupboard in the living room and is rummaging through boxes looking for toilet paper for little me. Now, this is something I would not expect from the top guy in the business, whom I later found out helped get Motown off the ground, who was responsible for Phil Spector's Wall of Sound. His music was famous, but his name wasn't really that well known. And it really hurt his feelings that he knew all these Motown people before they became famous. And he's the one who largely made him famous, working with Holland, O.C.A. Holland, and all the top guys. But his name never became well known. And my impression of Gene Page is that he felt unappreciated. And I think by the time I met him, he was pretty tired and weary, and success wasn't all he thought it'd be. He had the money, he just didn't have a fame. So he gives me a roll of toilet paper, and I go in the bathroom, and over the next few weeks, Sterling and I would stop by the office and see him. Because if you wanted to see Gene Page, you looked for him in his office, and it didn't matter whether it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. He was almost always at his office unless he was in the studio. So Sterling is someone who wanted to marry me, but he treated me really, really badly. And down the road, I found out he got his start in the music business by pimping. And truly, almost everyone you meet in Hollywood was some kind of crook before they got in the music business. Some type of addict or sold drugs or stripper or anything from the underworld. And I was really surprised because I thought really golden, sparkly, lucky people got into the business, and that's not really how it is. So when I would go in there, he would look at me with such love in his eyes. He had the most beautiful heart of anyone I've ever seen. And when he looked at me, my knees would go weak. I just felt like I was taking a warm bath, It was just pure love from the heart. And I guess when I wasn't there, he would talk to Sterling about me a lot. And I couldn't even imagine that this guy who had just been in a recording session with Natalie Cole the day before would be interested in anything about me, but I think he was worried. And it turned out he was known as the kid's LA father that wanted to get into the business. That's what Ray Parker Jr. called him. And when he met Barry White, he was very young. He was a hubcap thief, and he had walked all the way from Compton or wherever he was from, South Central LA, to Hollywood to try to be a star. And Gene gave him money for rent and food and arranged his music that made him world famous. And even when Barry was quite wealthy, Gene wouldn't let him pay him back for any of that. He also took a young, unknown 16-year-old girl by the name of Cher and put her singing backgrounds on You Lost That Love and Feeling. And in her memoir, Cher accredits some other guy. It begins with an N. His last name begins with an N, for arranging that song. And that was it who did it. That guy dropped out. And so Spector took a chance on Gene Page at the age of 23 and let him arrange that song, which became the most aired song of all time. Until maybe Billie Jean, because Billie Jean sure is aired a lot. You know, I hear it every time I get in the car. So Sterling told Gene that there was no love in my family, that my family didn't give two shits about me, and it kind of broke his heart. And then Gene heard Sterling say very derogatory things about me. And Gene would say, "So how's Mindy?" And he'd say, "Oh, she's acting like a kid." And Gene would say, "She is a kid." Duh, because Sterling was 30 years older than me. He was a year older than my dad. But believe me, his mentality was of a much younger person. So one day I went to his office and Sterling went out to his car to get music. And Gene said, "You're very pretty and talented. You just don't know it yet." And I said, "Oh, thank you." And then on another occasion, he said, "Have you ever heard of a singer named Michael Jackson?" I know I've told this in another video, but I'm going in a different direction this time. And I said, "Yes." He said, "You're both 20. You're both quiet. And something about you reminds me of him. I'm dying to set you two up. I think you'd get along great." And I'm like, this poor man doesn't look mentally ill. Why would he say such a thing? I just couldn't imagine in this old bungalow with pea gravel in the front yard would be the place that a man who knew Michael Jackson would work. You know, it wasn't registering in my head. So there was another time when I answered the phone at home and it was Gene, and I said, "Oh, Sterling isn't here." He said, "I didn't call to talk to Sterling." He had kind of this sing-song voice. He said, "In fact, he was just here and he was saying all kinds of derogatory comments about you. And I want you to know that I am sickened and disgusted by the way he treats you. And if you want me to, I'll get you an apartment and get you out of there." Now, Gene was a lovely person, but he was addicted to drugs and alcohol. And I could see he was a little erratic. And that seemed like a really bad idea for a man to be paying for an apartment for a young girl when he's married and has 2 kids and lives in Beverly Hills. So I really didn't say too much about it. But there was a time when I went and stayed at the Hollywood Holiday Inn at the end of Highland. And when I went down to eat, this man kept staring at me. Sterling was with me, and he looked like a quintessential pimp. He wore a velour suit with all this gold jewelry just draped all over him. And the guy kept staring at me and staring at me and staring at me. And he comes over and he says, "We don't want your kind around here." And I was struck. I don't even remember what went on after that, but Sterling talked to him and we got up and left. And on another occasion, we were at Jolly Roger on Sunset, and the manager came over and said, "This is not your private office. Get out of here." He was saying it to Sterling, and like, what the hell? So we went to visit Gene, and Gene, his eyes popped out. And I think I said, "I don't understand it because these managers are white and we're white, so why wouldn't they want us here?" And his eyes just popped out the sockets, and he got on the phone and called the Holiday Inn and said, "This is a very nice young lady, and how dare you treat her like that? I'm going to send her back down there to stay at your hotel. And if you give her any grief, I'll sue the hell out of you. And I got the money to do it." And he hung up. So eventually, I felt my only option was to come home to San Diego. All of the frightening things you hear about Hollywood, all the stories that Cheryl Hines tells you, I experienced almost the same thing, and I was scared. I didn't feel safe. I went to San Diego State and got my degree in economics just so I could feel safe. But the one person in my life who has helped me was Gene Page. He was my heart. And several years later, when I was at Sterling's celebration of life, Gene had already passed from substance abuse. But I heard a guy say, "I loved Gene." And the other guy said, "Oh, everybody loved Gene." With so much emotion. I thought, I'm not imagining this. He really was that breathtaking of a person. And he was the only person in my life who has ever showed me pure, unadulterated love without expecting anything tawdry in return. I was getting frightfully thin. A producer told me I needed to lose 20 pounds, and I think I only weighed 120, and I wouldn't eat. So he took me to our Tony's. Laurel Canyon crowd used to eat there, and he said, "What are you gonna get?" And I said, "Water." And he said, "I know, I'll get a chicken salad and you can try it. And if you like it, we'll get you one." So when his salad came, he put some salad on his fork and fed it to me and asked me if I like it. And by the way, this is the treatment that later anorexics would get when they needed it. We didn't even know what anorexia was in those days. So he got me my own salad and I ate that day. He was the most nurturing man, and he was what I needed. Seriously, I had no confidence. I thought I was hideously ugly. My dad told me that the nose hairs in my nostrils were too long and I needed to trim them. It absolutely devastated me when I was 13. And that kind of sounds like someone else I've heard of. Someone named Michael Jackson, whose dad told him his nose was a problem. So I think Michael and I both had body dysmorphia. We both like children, we both like animals, we both did a lot of reading, we're intellectuals. I think it might have been nice, although I've heard he was kind of a controlling narcissist, which, of course, in his position, how could you not be? And I tend to gravitate to that type. And over the years, they have nearly destroyed me, to tell you the truth. I have never been in love. I haven't had the chance to be because these men I get involved with don't know what love is. They don't want to be loved. They'll help me out. Maybe they'll care about me, but I don't think they know what love is. And I think Gene Page did. Now, he thought the best guy for me was Michael Jackson. And what I didn't mention is that I had a 1-year-old boy when I was talking to Gene about this. And I do not believe I would put my head on a chopping block if I had to prove that Gene Page would not set me up with someone who would hurt my son. He just was pure of heart. He had known the Jacksons from when they first came to California from Gary, Indiana. He arranged, got to be there, and never can say goodbye for them. And he was extremely intuitive. That's why he was so good at making people stars, because he could look at you and imagine what you ought to be doing, what kind of songs you could be singing. He could just size you up pretty well. And if Michael was weird around kids, there isn't a beggar's chance he would have offered to set me up with him and have my little boy around him. So I absolutely do not believe it. In the 80s, Gene arranged a lot of music for Jermaine. And Gene had a young son that was probably around 8 years old at the time. Very cute little boy, by the way. And he grew up in the studios with all these stars. He'd be running around asking for candy and stuff. One time, Sterling said, yeah, Mindy, you take him across the street to the liquor store to buy some candy. So we get over there, and he says, his name was Christopher, and he turned to me and he said, would you pay for it so I don't have to use my own money? And I'm digging in my purse, hoping to find some change, while this rich kid is asking me to buy his candy. But that's how it goes. So let me tell you from the bottom of my heart, I believe Michael Jackson was innocent for other reasons as well. But for now, I'll suffice it to say the person I trusted most on earth, the person who had my heart from the first day when I found out he had died, He even died at the same hospital where Michael Jackson would later die from liver and kidney failure. I tried to kill myself because I could not imagine being in the world without Gene Page. And he would not have let anything hurt me or my son. And this is my testimony. I am burying it today on Sunday, July 19th, 2026. And anyone else who tries to tell you that Michael Jackson was a child molester is full of it. Thank you.